Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here. I just want to note the time so I know what I could keep track of this and make sure everything's on schedule. So, but it's nice to be here. As we said, I'm Stuart Lieberman. This is Mike Sikovich. We're environmental lawyers, and this is what we do for a living. Every single day of our life, we do enviro cases, hazardous waste cases, landfill cases, cases where people are sick because they've been exposed to bad things in their drinking water or in their air, and that's the kinds of things that we do and have done for a long time. And I want to thank you very much for having us here, and I'd like to thank Chuck for inviting us to come back. It's always a pleasure. It's always a lot of fun to be here. A few years ago, Chuck had me speak in Atlantic City in this room that it was a club. It was like a lounge. And I don't know if any of you were there, but it was this little lounge with all these little tables, and there were lights around this circular sort of stage that I was on, and I felt like I was Shecky Green. I mean, it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my life, and it was the most interesting speaking engagement that I've ever done in my life as well. But they had me stay the entire week. Apparently it went over very well, and I headlined it. It was very, very good. But anyway, what we're going to talk about is what an environmental litigator expects from an appraiser. And the rules for our speaking engagement are simple. If you have any questions at any given time, just ask them. You know, we're not going to wait until the end. This is 2 hours, and if you wait to the end, you'll lose the context of whatever it is that you want. So feel free to weigh in at any single time, and we'll try to answer the question. I don't guarantee we'll know the answer, but at least we'll give it a shot. Let me give you an overview of where we're going to go on this. First of all, we're going to discuss the federal rules of civil procedure and how they relate to what an expert does. Then we're going to talk about the rules of evidence and evidentiary issues. We'll talk about issues dealing with environmental cases in general and how appraisers fit in. We'll deal with some of the USPAP issues, an issue of third-party reliance. That's where somebody other than your client relies on your report and what can happen then. We have a few cases that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what a lawyer might look for when weighing different competing appraisers to see who he's going to hire for a particular, or she's going to hire to be an expert in a particular case. And then at exactly 5:11, we will begin our 1-minute conclusion, ending at 5:12, which will be 2 hours. Now, have any of you ever been an expert in a case? And have they been tax appeals generally? Is that where you've? Has anybody ever here been an expert in a case other than a tax appeal, where you've been an expert you've been? What kind of case, just generally? What was it?
It was a contract dispute where the property values had been depreciated. Someone entered into a contract when the values were higher, and then they had to show the loss of value of the property, what the damages were to the buyer.
So in other words, so that was a contract case. So in contracts, what they say is if somebody breaches a contract, they're entitled to the benefit of the bargain that they would have had there not been a breach, and you were there to show what the benefit of the bargain would have been. Yes. That sounds like that's what you were doing. Anybody else serve as an expert? Yes, sir.
Yes. Condemnation.
Oh, it's so funny. I thought you were talking to it. It was like a ventriloquist kind of thing going on. I was like, that was the coolest thing in the world. But who's speaking? Who's speaking? Yes.
I just answered condemnation cases.
Oh, okay. In what state, by the way?
New Jersey.
Oh, okay. Are we still doing those? The government's out of money. I didn't know they are going to. I guess it was a while back, I'm guessing, right? Recently?
Yeah, Somerset, Morris County.
Was it highways or roads? Okay.
Road widenings, highways.
Okay. It sounds like you've had a fair amount of experience doing that, huh? Okay.
Yes.
What law firm were you working for?
Well, actually, from various, the counties, it would be county council,
Okay.
Somerset County, Morris County, and
Okay.
they have their own, or they would hire out.
Okay, sure. Anybody else? Yes, sir. And the white, yes, you now really, yes.
Bankruptcy, divorce, marital, obviously, estate, and I was involved in easements.
Now, the divorce, was this somebody else's? I just.
Yes, it was. It was somebody else's.
Okay.
There's quite a few of them.
I'm glad to hear that. Yes, sir.
Bankruptcy, like he said, condemnation for railroads.
Oh,
I
okay.
did railroad property, yeah, things like that.
Well, that's interesting because, in railroads, one of the biggest problems with railroads is establishing title, because so many of them have gone through bankruptcy and all kinds of things that it's very hard to give somebody good title in bankruptcy. It's so often you have to sort of give a quitclaim deed, to somebody in that kind of case. So I think you could see, and you knew this already, but this sort of just points out, there are a lot of different things that an appraiser could talk about in a court as an expert. It's not just tax appeals. Of course, that's an area that in New Jersey, which is the area I'm most familiar with, we see most appraisers, but there are so many other areas. And the area that we do it is environmental law. Now, in the context of environmental law, where we use appraisers are in some select areas. For example, if somebody has polluted a piece of property and we represent one of the parties who's been injured as a result of the pollution, often there's a claim for what's called diminution of property value. Has anybody ever heard the term diminution of property value? That's a growingly recognized term, diminution of property value. And very often we'll have an appraiser come in, and if we're representing the plaintiff, explain that as a result of the discharge of the contaminant, the property's worth 90 to 95% less than it would otherwise be, regardless of the. So I mean, we'll show diminution, and that's what we'll do. I'm going to tell you something that's interesting, by the way. There have been a bunch of cases in New Jersey involving contamination and attempts by appraisers to determine what the post-remediation value of the property is. A component of this is stigma. Has anybody ever heard of stigma? Stigma is when, grandma was buried in the basement for a few years, and then you try to resell the house, right? That's stigma. I've never really, that's what they always say, but I've never encountered a house like that. I guess I'm happy. But stigma is the impact of an event, of a previous event, that lingers beyond the resolution of that event. That's sort of what I think of when I think of stigma. And in the case of environmental property, of environmentally contaminated property, there's often some stigma. Most of you are from out of state, or most of you from Jersey? Most of you are Jerseyans? How many are out of state? Okay. So we Jerseyans are a hardy group. And, there have been a lot of different reports, and, this is without attribution, and if you ever say I said this and you're against me in a case, I'll deny it. But we New Jerseyans are a hardy group, and I know, like in Newark, they've done some appraisals of properties that were contaminated and then turned into townhouses. And the question was, what was the stigma associated with the property? Could you sell it for what would otherwise be fair market value, or would there have to be a discount? And if there was a discount, how much would the discount be? It's not a lot. It is. We're a hardy. We'll live just about anywhere, and when we're darn proud of that. We live there, and we'll zealously live. We'll go where no one else will go in New Jersey.
Born in a log cabin, so why not?
That's exactly right. I mean, that's right. It's very hard to find property in New Jersey that isn't in some manner, impacted by contamination. By the way, I want to tell you something that's interesting from a contamination standpoint and a stigma and an appraisal standpoint. I've been an environmental lawyer for almost as long as Sinkovich. We both started in '86. I don't know if you were born in '86. Anyway, I've been doing this since 1986 is when I started. And a lot of things have changed, but a lot of things are still the same. One thing I remember is this, though. In '86, when I started, and I used to be a deputy attorney general, I used to work for the Attorney General's office and representing the DEP. And that's how I got my experience. It's a great place to get your experience. And I remember back in those days, they said the best piece of property to build houses on would be what? Can anybody imagine what the best prior use would be to then buy and develop into houses? What do you think? Farmland. Farmland. And in 86, you would have been right. That's right. 86, because that's, yes.